section for the wainscot. One of the things I love to do to dress up a room, whether it be in a remodeling situation or new construction, is put wainscoting on the walls. Now, this wainscot detail is created using a face frame that we pocket screwed together, a piece of 1/4 inch plywood that fits inside the frame, and then a panel mold. I've done this hundreds of times and I still never get tired of seeing that detail go up on the wall. Now, one of the other approaches to doing this, which would be really hard to do, would be to do true raised panel construction. But with a true raised panel construction, first of all, we'd have to have 3 expensive shapers and a lot of tooling, expensive tooling. Plus, we would be spending time gluing up raised panels, which is an extra step. The lumber for raised panels is more expensive than this plywood. And the other thing about using plywood is dimensionally stable, where I can put a really wide piece of plywood in and not have to worry about shrinking or swelling. But a raised panel, once you get past about 20 inches, you have to really start thinking about problems with shrinking and swelling. So there's a lot of reasons to do this type of construction with the frame, put together the pocket screws, and then the plywood. For this application, we're going to be fitting the plywood in between the face frame, but there's several different ways that it can be done. We could put the plywood on the back of the face frame. The only thing you have to worry about when you put the plywood in the back of the face frame is on your door openings, everything that you add to the back of the face frame starts to push you further and further out towards the front of the casing trim. We've actually added a back band detail here, so if this had been a remodel job, what we might need to do as our first step would be to come in and actually add an additional piece of molding to all of the openings so that when we brought our wainscot detail into it, it has something to die into. One of the real advantages of doing this construction with pocket screws is we're going to be able to put this frame together right here on the floor. And instead of us wrestling with a lot of clamps and trying to get this long section all together at one time, we're going to deal with each joint individually. Then we're just going to flop it over on its back, sand the face frame, we'll spin it around and put it right in place on this wall. And I'm going to have one guy, Jeremy's going to be helping me. If we had tried to do this with a more traditional method of joinery, like say dowels or biscuits, something like that, this would have to be at least a 3-man job. Plus, once we put it together, we'd have to go take an hour, hour and a half break while we waited for each section to dry. So we're getting ready, we're going to screw this together, and we'll get started towards putting a really wonderful wainscot detail on that wall. Okay, that's our last screw. Since these joints are being held together now by the pocket screws, we don't have to really wait for the glue to dry. We're going to go ahead and flip this frame over right now and start sanding. And actually, as I look at these joints, there's not going to have to be a whole lot of sanding done because the pocket screws have done a great job of flushing the joints up on the top. But we're going to sand this and we're ready to put up on the wall, fit our plywood. Okay, now we're ready to put this frame in place. Jeremy, if you'll grab that end. And a wall surround. If we plan right, we'll be able to barely get it turned around in this room. That's one of the things that you always want to think about is the order in which you build them. Let me come back out a little bit. It's going to be pretty snug. Now you may have noticed as we're laying this out that we have a wider stile in the corner, and the reason for that is when this other panel gets put in the wall, it's going to cover part of it and we'll end up with an even amount of stile showing each side. And just a little bit of something that always helps me remember, you know, people sometimes say, well, how do you tell, what's the difference between a stile and a rail? And the easiest thing that I can tell you is if you think about, you know, the rails on a railroad run horizontally, the rails are always the piece of a frame that are run horizontally, and the stiles are the vertical pieces. Just raise that up to the line a little bit. There we go. All right. Just like in the past, I'm going to put 1/4-inch plywood on with just a little bit of yellow glue behind it. Need to go over and grab this other nailer that's got the shorter nails. And since we've got the sheetrock backing, we really only need to hold this in place until the glue dries. So we'll put most of our nails around the perimeter where the panel mold will cover it up later. We may put just a couple out in the middle, but almost all the nails will just go around the perimeter. I probably wouldn't want to use construction adhesive in this instance because it tends to just be a little bit thicker and it could hold the piece out. We're going to want to try to, as best as possible, get the exact same amount distance between the plywood out to the face of the molding of the stile. I'm shooting these nails at a little bit of an angle so that they'll engage through the most of the sheetrock. I've been paying a whole lot of attention where the studs are, because all I've really got to do is hold it in place until the glue dries. It's behind me. All right, you're gonna now. Things went pretty well for us on this layout. We didn't have any of our plugs in the way of the paneling or the panel mold, but you always want to take in consideration the location of the plugs and such when you're laying out your panels. I always, if I can, want to have the panels such that you have an odd number. Odd numbers of panels are more pleasing to your eye than even numbers. So if I can, I try and lay it out to where I get odd numbers of panels and try and keep relatively close to the same size panels all the way around the room. Okay, now we're ready for the molding. Well, that's the last piece of molding on that section of wainscot. There's a couple things that we've done to kind of add the finishing touches. The first is we've put a piece of baseboard on there. And again, the thing you have to remember when you're doing your original design is allow for all those moldings and everything from where they're going to die into the door casing to the height. A lot of times it's good to make a simple story pole. Now the other thing that we did is add a bolection molding to make a top cap or sort of a chair rail piece. Now bolection moldings are a little bit different than some other moldings in that they sit on top of a piece and then step back. There's that piece of bolection molding. This piece of bolection molding is sitting on top of the frame and then stepping back to the drywall. So it makes a really nice, graceful transition from our wainscot section back to the drywall. The only thing you have to remember when you're cutting a piece like this is it has to be cut like it's going to be installed. So when I take this piece to the saw, I have to have a block underneath it that shims the bottom out the same distance that it's going to sit when it's installed. It's a simple thing, but you have to remember to do that. Well, this type of project just always makes me feel great. All the moldings put in place, everything you add to it just gets better and better looking. Now all we need is the painter to come in and stain it.